Welcome to the show. Today's topic, living together. Yeah, that's a major step and a little complicated in the whole essence of, what we expect and when is it a good time to press that button, who does it, who initiates that conversation, and so on and so forth. Now, let me start off by saying I don't know when it's a good time, whether it be 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, etc. That's kind of in an individual basis, and whatever your acceptance or religions is. For me, I think I keep on repeating it that for me, it's definitely advisable to wait for 2 years, right? To date someone for 2 years. And when I'm saying dating for 2 years in those aspects, I hope I've already said it, and I think I have, but just in case I haven't, to cover my bases, I do mean living together. I mean, living together, dating for 2 years apart from each other. That's in my mind. That's the scenario that I'm playing now. Now, in those scenarios, could you move in earlier? Sure. There's not really a right and wrong answer. And towards the end of the podcast, I'll reveal why that is. That there's no real good answer to it, but we're going to discuss it anyway because the answer is pretty easy, simple, but or pretty straightforward is what I should say. But the living together isn't. So the first one is, when should you, right? And the simple answer is when both of you guys feel comfortable, when the conversation has been had, where you feel that you have realized or recognized a lot of the idiosyncrasies that that person might have, or some of the bad habits that they have acquired through their lifetime, and can you tolerate them, or do they bug you, or so on and so forth. So hopefully you would have already had a long enough history with a positive projection towards where your relationship has been going and towards where it's heading. Because ultimately, if you're in the dating game, obviously you're in the dating game to be able to sorry, I was checking the mic, to lead to a relationship, right? Where we are sharing our life with someone in a more an intimate way. Now, depending on your religious background, a lot of religions don't want you to live together until you get married, and of course, that's why I prefaced it in the beginning, that it varies from person to person, from religion, and it's just a very complicated to pinpoint it. There's a lot of signs as to what classifies as a healthy waiting period, but again, towards the end, it's very easy. It's a very straightforward answer. So basically, again, when should you? There's not really a time frame, but preferably when, like I said, all the progressions have been had and you've been dating for a while. Everything's been good, low fights, a lot of communication. You've had a little bumps in the road, but nothing too. You've seen how both of you, how she reacts to discomfort, because just life happens. You would have had 2 years to deal with issues and see how she reacts, whether she blows up and whatnot. And if all of that is good, I don't have an answer as to who should initiate the conversation. If you hear dating coaches or life coaches, some you hear don't ever move in with someone, right? Because statistically speaking, when you start when you move in with someone, the likelihood that you guys are going to split up is magnified. And in essence, they are correct. But it's with people that rush into things or rush into relationships without allowing a healthy time to get to know someone. So the way I kind of laid it down, it gives you 2 years of always having a progressive or progressing relationship that's always going into a new step, a new adventure, a new kind of a flow. And once you establish that kind of a healthy base and you jump into a relationship, studies find those relationships last longer because you've already been dating for a while. 2 years is a very long time. A lot of stuff can go wrong, but likelihood, if you've already, again, you've gone on vacations, you've seen the worst of this person, the good, the charitable, whatnot, the fake facade has come down, so you're more able to be okay with that conversation of known that person enough to be like, okay, I could definitely share a house or an apartment with this person. Again, the topic of marriage, we could have that discussion, but for this topic that I'm covering is not really important. Yes, I recognize that there's certain stuff there, but for the point that I'm making is really irrelevant. So once you come up to that, and like I said, there's not really a whether she should ask or you should ask. At that point, you've dated. I feel it's okay for the guy to bring it up if that's what he wants genuinely. If not, you continue the dating process until she brings it up. Like, hey, we've been dating for 3 years now, and I think it's maybe a time for us to live together. And you'll hear again more people in the dating world or life, they'll say for men to allow that to happen, which I understand. But also, once you're in that kind of a relationship and you've established whatever boundaries they are you have as a man, and it'll be kind of self-evident, so it's not really, like I said, it's not something big. Yes, I recognize that it can turn a girl off. Like maybe she's not ready to jump into a relationship. But you as a man, if you are focused, again, if your directive is to get into a relationship, period, it doesn't matter that it's with her, but if your goal is to find a relationship, then your movement should be towards getting that relationship. And that's why I feel it's okay, because again, just because we're men doesn't mean that our feelings or whatever we want to do is not valid or not being heard. It's that, or we should not being heard, but we should put it off to the wayside. No, we should definitely if it's our life too, and if we want a relationship, which I'm neither condoning nor talking shit about it or talking smack about it, if that's your goal, then I feel for men it's okay to bring it up after you've had this 2 year dating period. It's way more than enough time to bring at least a conversation of that. Hey, we've been dating for 2 years, and I want a girlfriend. I mentioned that that's my expectations, and I really think that now that I've gotten to know you for a couple of years, that I would like to take it to the next step. Maybe not right away, but hopefully here soon we could start moving into a conversation and a direction where it moves us in together. And boom, you could have that conversation. I would recommend, if you do guys have 2 apartments, she move in with you. You don't want to move in with her. I mean, you can. I don't really care about the power dynamic, but since this is not the norm, if she has a better apartment in a better area and whatnot, maybe that discussion could be had. But anyways, so again, I'm when you should do it and who you should bring it up. Yeah, depending on who you hear, you should let the woman bring it up, and then you kind of be like not surprised, but say, "Oh, okay, cool," and then kind of you're leading it after she suggests to you. And again, I'm fine with it, but I'm fine with it the other way too, because again, it's a man's right to be able to go after what he wants and expect it to go after what he wants. And if a relationship is what he wants, then a relationship is what he shall have. The next step after that is looking at the pros and cons, right? And I didn't write any list of what the whole pros and cons are. That's up to you, right? So you have to sit there and say, okay, me living with her, and there's a pro list and a cons list. I know it sounds stupid. Some might disagree, and I don't really care. It's just a tool. You're not gonna decide whatever off of this, but you write down the pros and the cons. And of course, you want to have more in the pros than you would in the cons. Just off the top, I mean, just in case someone was saying, "Oh, what is it?" Some of them, obviously, the pros, you save on rent. You're splitting on utilities and whatnot. Some of the cons is you lose some of your privacy and your individuality, because now you are sharing something with someone in one households. So those, it could be a pro and a con depending, but those are a couple of cons that, and pros and cons as to, but the point is to make sure that you write them down, think them out, talk them out, whatever. And as long as there's more pros to it, both financially, spiritually, mentally, everything, then you just move on to the next step, and moving towards it. Like I said, you're not making the decision as just one extra tool that just to solidify the, okay, yeah, we want to do this. So once you decide on, yeah, we want to move in together, you want to start setting expectations. And you might be saying, well, isn't that the whole, you've been saying that since the dating and the courtship and the dating process and the in entering a relationship, going the 2 years, and isn't that all we, having you already said, setting expectations? But that's exactly the point. I want to ingrain it in people that you have to set your boundaries and expectations, and your standards are, and make those known. And they're going to change for every step, because what you did in the courtship doesn't go into the dating exclusively, and then the dating exclusively doesn't enter into your relationship, because it changes. And just the same thing when you're in a relationship and you move your relationship into living together, there's changes that come. There's new expectations. You're gonna mold them, and it's gonna keep on evolving and changing for the scenario that you need. But the bottom line is that you are communicating those standards, boundaries, and expectations to her, so that before the lease is signed, before the payments are due, and before money's starting to flow, you have an idea of, hey, and you should already have this, because again, you've had enough time dating, 2 years minimum, that some of this stuff, like the cleaning and cooking, laundry, etc., is some of the things that you want to be discussed. Like, hey, I know you suck at cooking, so I'll cook, and you could just learn until you learn something. Then we'll switch off and stuff like that. Like I said, laundry, just who's picking up. It depends a lot on work schedule, whether one person works, both people work, whether you're working from home, whether you're traveling a lot. It really depends, and there's so many scenarios and variables that, to name just a few, it will be misleading, and I don't want to do that. So another thing is setting not only your boundaries, expectations in just the cleanliness, also you want to set it on the bills, right? Like, who are we splitting it 50-50? Do I take over? Do we pay half the rent, but I pay the light, you pay the phones, and da 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 da. And so you have to bring that up before anything is done. Are we going to be a 50-50 household? Are we going to be a 75-25? And it's okay if the woman says, hey, I'm old fashioned and I want my man to pay most of the bills, but I'll contribute to some, as long as as I'm going to hit up right after this, as long as you guys are saving together and having mutual interests and goals that you guys are achieving together, I have no problem in some of these relationships. And honestly, if you want to take it to more extremes and say, hey, the man pays 100% of the bills and stuff, but I'm gonna pitch in for trips and buy him gifts and all that stuff, I am okay, fellas, for you guys to enter that kind of relationship, as long as she is also at least funding the vacations, funding the party time, funding the buying you nice gifts, pampering you too, because you're holding it down. You're not taking nothing from her, but she's gonna show it in her gratitude by stepping up. Not that you won't also contribute to spoiling her and buying her nice things and pitching in for the vacation and the fun time. It's just saying an example as a man, because I know for some men it's super important to be able to lay down that kind of a feel. And I ain't mad at you. Go ahead and do you, so it's super important to be able to talk about that and set those boundaries and expectations and demands, and saying, hey, you're going to handle this, I'm going to handle it. So there is no miscommunication, which again just flows into the other point. On the next point is having a joint savings account, having a savings for trips and dates and fun time together, because that is super important and is something that a lot of couples fail to do, through no fault of their own. I mean, I shouldn't say through no fault of their own, through definite fault of their own. If you want to, think about just rushing into a relationship, I should have no sympathy and I should just call it like I see it. But sometimes my heart gets the best of me and I don't want to be too rude. So you want to have a savings account where you guys are both putting. So if you're in a 50-50 household where we're paying 50-50, you could still have your own, checking account. She could have her own checking and savings account. You open up a third where you guys put in money, and then you could split that one into a savings account and put stuff in there for long-term trips, short-term trips, and whatnot. You could get more detailed, and I'll get into that when I hit the finance, and some of the finance episodes, as far as like budgeting and saving and stuff, some of that stuff, and some of the cool things I've done and I am doing to save money. But it's definitely, again, it could get a lot more detailed, but it becomes kind of fun and addictive just to start saving money and moving through that. But I've seen a lot of couples develop some really super interesting one, and again, it's something you could do pretty constant, and at least it's moving you guys to saving for fun times, trips times, dates times, which, because it's an important part in having, once you move in with someone, again, it's becoming a lot more emotional, a lot more so you're gonna want to keep things interesting, just like you were doing when you were dating or in a relationship, and you're vacillating from the fun dates to the dinner dates. You're going to want to continue that, even not continue that even more, but you're going to have to be more cognizant of doing it more, because a lot of these relationships, because you could call this leading into marriage or this being marriage, whatever you want to call it. Again, not really my concern, but the effort is a little different, because now there's joint stuff. You're buying joint furniture. Maybe you guys get pregnant and have a kid. Joint, phone bills, joint bank accounts, or whatever it is. Maybe one person had a phone bill and changed them to the other person's plan, because you get a huge break and you guys could save some money. It's important to keep that relationship, even though now it's become a more intimate relationship, fresh and exciting and never stale, and always working on that relationship, just like anything. Just like if you're working on yourself, if you're working on your finances, in your investments, in your hustle, the same thing, man. We have to put into the relationships, and because we're the ones that are directing this relationship, we're the ones that are steering it. So we have to take that by the wheel and direct it, not just leave it to chance. We have to set these boundaries, set, hey, this is my life and this is the kind of life and whatever. Again, I don't want to go into direct examples, because it cheats the message, as to saying whatever it is to you, making sure that you guys have some kind of a joint venture, a joint investment into your own healthiness of your relationship, to allow to get to those 20-30 years, those wow you guys are in that forever. Like I said in the previous podcast, that's where that's gonna get you guys, because you guys will all, not saying that it's gonna be perfect, not saying, like I said in my previous podcast, that it still can lead to a separation, or AKA divorce, but you want to give yourself your best odds. So it's one of those things where if you have a savings and you're saving for trips, you're being mindful about date night, and you're being mindful about fun times, spoiling each other and having each other's mind when you guys do everything, is only going to benefit your relationship and make your relationship that much more stronger and healthier. And I talked a little bit about the dating, but my rule of thumb, and there's relationships now that I wish I would have done this, that it probably would have changed course in some of those relationships, and I was just too dumb in my earlier years, and not so much earlier years, but going out. Now, having these date nights, like I say, I'm preaching that we save for date nights, for fun nights, because it's no fun just to stay at home and Netflix and chill and do that same old, same old. You have to, women like to be shown off. Women like to be pranced around. They make them look pretty. They spend all that time getting ready, and they want to go out and have a good time. They don't just want to be like, well, I don't even get pretty. I don't even get dolled up, or just here. He doesn't show me off, and it could lead to problems, even though it should never get to that, because again, I'm trying to preach a healthy communication. This part where you're gonna have a date night every 2 weeks or twice a month to just keep it fresh. I don't know what it is, depending on your city, your town, wherever you stay at, it has to be adjusted to that. Also, your budget, how much you guys are making, and what kind of agreement you guys have in the relationship. But you wanna budget some money where you're going out to dinners, movie nights, dancing, sightseeing, maybe just a staycation. If there's kids involved, they go to the babysitters, and you guys have your own time together. It's super important, and in these days of relationships, or in these days with relationships, they neglect that. Oh, we don't have time, and we only have gone out like twice in 1 year, and that's super unhealthy. We forget that we are also humans. Yes, we're parents, and yes, kids demand a lot of attention, and yes, it was our own choice. But if you're doing everything correctly, and you're providing, and you have the means to get a babysitter and have that, but you have to have these opportunities to detach and be able to love the person that you fell in love with, because sometimes we get bogged down with being a dad, being a husband, or being a worker, that we forget that we courted her once, but because we're going through life, we detach from that, and then she becomes detached because that's not the way you got her. And it's not fair for her, because and I get it, it's not fair for us men either, because hey, what are we supposed to do, right? We're out there trying to get our thing off, and what, or our hustle, or just putting food on the table, whatever that scenario is. But it can't be that lame of excuse in saying that it has to be something cognizant, just the same way your health has to be in the forefront of your mind, your finances has to be in your forefront of your mind, everything, your relationships, your friendships, everything has to be, you have to be cognizant and always aware of everything that you do. And I know it sounds exhausting, but that's what a man does, is you take control of as many aspects of your life as possible. And if you do decide to move in with someone, that's a huge responsibility upon the shoulders of us men. Again, whether it's 50-50, 75-25, or 100%, it's irrelevant. As men, we have a responsibility to lead that relationship no matter what. I don't care what scenario you have to lead, and lead it in a way that you see like the ultimate goal of this relationship is. And again, one of those aspects is having a healthy dating life within that relationship, whether you have kids, whether you don't, whether you're working to that marriage, I don't care. When you are living together, people tend to get lazy, and that is the first down step to the downfall, yeah, it's just the first. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to give yourself, or start momentum into a negative. Just like everything, nothing gets built overnight, but you want to move. You want to have that momentum moving forward. So little by little, you gain a little bit of momentum. Just like the best I could say is just the gym analogy, is that you start going in the first day, and you're definitely not going to see results after the first day, but you started the momentum. You go the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next week, and the next week, and the next month, and the next month, and the next year, and the next year. And then you look back and you see that the momentum you started with that first day, and the fact that you had dedication to keep that, to just that first little momentum, and make sure that you said, I'm gonna keep this going. And I know I bring it in fitness, but it's with everything. If you want to start your whatever project or your side hustle, you have to start with whatever. Just like starting this podcast, I was tired of hearing people, you got to just start it. You got to just start it. Not people in my life, just like shit that I was listening to. Like sometimes I would stumble like on a motivational video, and you just got to start somewhere. Your first podcast is going to suck. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of them, more than the first one, have sucked. It was basically one of those things, but like starting that, and even in those YouTube videos that I saw, it's like, oh, working on momentum. You got to start in momentum, but as practice, you'll get better. And it's for sure, that's definitely the path or the right message to say, and to keep on repeating, because it's definitely not the only way, but it's definitely a true statement that, hey, you have to work on whatever it is, and little by little progress is a very, very, good thing. So being cognizant of your love life within that relationship, now that you guys have made it more intimate, is super and essential to a healthy relationship. And a lot of divorces or separation, when they look back on them or they get asked, is for that. Oh, got stale, we didn't go out as much, and I didn't feel appreciated, and she nagged me too much, and something that could have, we never had date night, and it's something that could have been fixed and would have saved a good 20% of relationships that ended because of that just one simple fact. So why even have that on the table? Just make sure you handle it and have that always, and make sure. It doesn't mean that hey, you know what, honey, I don't want to go out. Cool. You save that. So you save that, you put it in the bank. Doesn't mean you still don't save. Just now you have maybe a little bit more money to go a little bit more nicer. Maybe you catch a really nicer show now, like here in Vegas. Maybe normally you spend, you go out and your tickets cost $80, and there's certain shows in that market, each one, but now maybe you could spend $120 for tickets for, you and your girl, or you and wifey, and catch that better show. So you just, cool. You give her the option if she doesn't want to, and you don't want to, cool. You just save the money and keep on trucking, but you keep on focus, saying, okay, still in 2 weeks, I'm planning something. In 2 weeks, I'm going to have something. And we'll go into dropping hints, when you're in these kind of relationships, in another podcast, like, something about just how to drop hints and tips to your girl, to kind of not get what you want, but kind of get information, because that's what we want. That's what women want, or what women say, oh, he knows what I'm thinking. It's not really that we know what we're thinking, but if you know what to do and how to lay down these recon questions, where you're just throwing stuff out there throughout your relationship, and you just kind of get this information back on her, so you'll be able to do that. And but I want to kind of devote that to its own podcast, not just in this. And again, I'm going to repeat the last 2 points, because it's important to say before I close this podcast out. It's being flexible, of course, because now you're entering into a union, not in a religious way or in a marriage way, but you're entering, again, a more intimate relationship. Now you're sharing the same spaces, so you want to be flexible at this point. Yes, I know I've been saying, hey, be strong, be this, be that, but once you follow this not follow this plan, but once you follow this type of progression and adjust it to your own life and your own situation, it should be someone that you want to spend a very long time with, because again, you've allowed the natural, the quality, she had to qualify herself to you. She had to go through steps and earn her place by you, and in her place to be in a relationship. And I know I'm probably wording it wrong, but you guys know what I'm saying. She qualified herself. Then not only that, you've been having a healthy courtship throughout, when you guys have been dating, when you guys became exclusive. And now that you're about to enter into a relationship, living together, you want to be flexible, right? So let's say she doesn't like the toilet seat down, and you've always put it up. You know what? You're going to have to be cognizant of putting that down, just to keep the peace. If she likes the dishes on the bottom right, of a certain cabinet, first of all, that should have been a red flag. But again, you do it to appease her and keep the peace, because obviously at that point in your dimension, maybe you forgot that to ask that question, or maybe you don't care that she's that nitpick on how she wants the where she wants the plates, or where she wants the cups, or in what level, whatnot. Cool. Some people like that kind of attention to details. Some people don't. To each their own. But the fact is that you have to be flexible, not on all things, but on some things, to be able to let that message go across and saying, hey, I understand you and I'm hearing you and I am flexible in these. We could have a little discussion. Well, I'm not really into this, but you have to be flexible upon this, because again, you're entering a more intimate relationship, and some of that stoic, mindset and mind frame that most of us men want to have has to come down. No, enough of the bullshit, enough of this, fake persona we have. It has to come down, and we have to start becoming flexible, because again, we've entered into a way more intimate agreement that we are going to start sharing. And the close to last point or mark is upholding personal and relationship boundaries. And the reason I have them both like that, because it's just an example where I could hammer it home as that you're still going to have your personal boundaries that you have introduced to her. She's qualified to you, or qualified herself to you, and you've established, what your expectation, your standards, and where this is heading, or what your vision is, whatnot, and so on and so forth. And then you enter into this dating. She asked you to go, to be her boyfriend, and you agreed. And you started having different kind of boundaries now that you guys were dating, not living together, but you had boundaries and expectations now as a couple. Hey, we're exclusive. You can't talk to. I don't want you to do, have certain dating apps. We delete them together. Whatever your expectations and demands and all that stuff is, in a healthy manner. And then you going into, hey, we're in a relationship, and again, like I said, you have those boundaries, and it's gonna keep on evolving. And what you want to do once you're living together is enforce all those, your personal and relationship boundaries, because now those both of the dynamics are true in that reality. And a lot of people like to forget about their personal boundaries and just kind of focus on the relationship boundaries. And a lot of people in these situations, that's the problem, where they start losing their identity because they start appeasing the other person. And that's really unhealthy. So I say it, your personal and relationship boundaries, because that's what should be on your forefront. And in upholding those personal behaviors, behaviors and boundaries and standards and such, your personal ones and relationship ones. And if you do that and have those two things cognizant, like, hey, yes, this is important in the contents of the relationship, and this is important in the content of who I am, who myself am to this world, or present to this world, is important. And you're going to have to vacillate from both, but you're going to have to be able to uphold them. And that is important. Of course, you're going to uphold them in a different manner. Again, I think I said it in the last podcast, and I'm going to say it in this one: communication. You have to communicate whatever disagreements, whenever someone crosses one of your standards, one of your barriers, one of your, like I said, your I want to call them no-goes. I know there's a certain thing, but I can't think of it now. Just whatever your standards, and they can continue, they cross it, you bring it up to the attention, and you should have this communication in every aspect. But once you enter into we're living together, that communication has to happen, because you just can't leave now. You have a lease together, mortgage together, you have furniture now together, kids together. It's not as easy to separate and just leave. And this is not talking about toxic relationships, because again, I'm hoping that if you do this right and adjust it to your life, you would have a somewhat of more of a healthier relationship than what people are accustomed to, because you're not rushing into things and you're upholding your boundaries and standards. You want to, so I'm taking this example to the full extent, where there's a healthy flow of communication, and you're being cognizant to not let that happen, because you could follow everything correctly. And once you establish in a relationship and start getting into the 10-year or 5-year, 10-year mark, that's when people get comfortable. They don't keep on following up. But if you're upholding your boundaries and standards, you won't let that happen, because it's like a check for yourself, a check for your relationship, and making sure that you're hitting those marks. And if you're not, if something's wrong with that flow, just like you would with your car, if something doesn't sound right, you take it into the mechanic. And in this case, you bring it up to your girl and you say, hey, we need to sit down real quick. You know what? I don't like the way our sex life is going. You know, last time you did it, we kind of felt kind of cold. Or, you know what? I'm not really feeling your cooking. Not any offense, but why don't you let me cook? Or, hey, let's cook together, and then we could kind of see what works for both of us. That communication has to happen. Now, just because you have that conversation doesn't mean that the relationship's not going to end. Again, that's a story that I'm going to keep on repeating, but it doesn't mean it's going to end. It can end, but the point is you want to give yourself the best chance to have a long relationship, because again, if you're in the dating world, yes, I know there's people that are saying it, that are in it just for the sex, but for the most part, if people are dating, they're looking for a relationship that leads to something. Whatever that something is, it's individual, and it's all up to you. And to finish the living together, and like I said, the time frame and all the great reveal, as you will, as the wisest words that I can speak to this. What probably aren't my words, but it's the first thing that I wrote down when I thought about this subject. When I wrote down, like, you know, living together, the first thing I wrote is there's really no time frame for it. There's really no time frame for it. So, and what I mean by that is that I've seen couples move in together within a week. And let's just, people might think all crazy, just for the sense of not getting into that story right now, let's just call it a month. So in a month time frame, I've seen people move in together and last for 10 years. I've seen them last for 20. I've seen them last for 30. I've seen them still together now. I've also seen relationships where they have waited for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And as soon as they moved in together, within a year, they broke up. They separated, divorced, whatnot. So there's really no clear example. And you could quote a bunch of, or hey, this studies this studies that. And I know I do that myself. So if you want to do it, I guess, you know, you could put it in the comments. For the most part, there is no evidence that suggests whether you do it early, whether you do it later, has any bearing on it. You know, there's varying, I want to call them debates, not really debates. There's various points that prove to each one of them. Same thing with marriage. I've seen people get married like right when they met with each other, within a month they got married and live happily ever after. And some that waited and dated and stuff like that, got married and got divorced like within, you know, a couple of years. So there's not really any correct answer. It's all based to you. But what I want to hammer home is making sure that the communication is there, that standards and boundaries are being respected, that the relationship is being honored if you're in that intimacy, and a flow of give and take, of communicating, and having not only our met as men being met and but also us meeting the needs of the woman that we're sharing the life. And again, if you don't care about relationship, this topic is not for you, and why did you fucking tune in? But if your goal is relationships, then take this advice. Don't take it, I don't know, you know, whatever is your cup of tea. So anyways, I hope you guys found this informative. I hope you guys learned something. I thought this topic was interesting. Share the video, like, subscribe to the channel, hit that, you know, the bell notifications and stuff like that. Again, thank you guys for listening to me. And until next time.